One of the other neat things that we can do to layers is add layer styles. These are like little special effects that we can add to our layers, and we can always change them later on if we want to. Alright, so if you look at the bottom of the layers palette, you'll see a little F icon. That's your layer style icon. It's grayed out right now because I'm on the background layer, and I can't add a style to the background layer. So if you recall from an earlier lesson, if you double click on the word background, just click OK. That turns it into a regular layer that's not locked, which means now I can add a layer style. And you see the F icon is enabled down here. You can also just double click right onto a blank area on the layer, and that's going to open up your layer style dialog too. Alright, so let's start off simple here. I'm going to add a gradient overlay, and I'm going to take the angle setting and just move it over to the left. Alright, and before I go any further, I got to tell you this. If you just click the checkbox, it doesn't change the settings over here. You can't get in there and manipulate the gradient overlay settings. You've got to click on the text. I get that question a lot because people aren't seeing the same thing I am. So click on the text. Now you can manipulate it. Drag that angle setting over here to the left, and what I want to do is create white to black, and I want to drop out the black. If you recall, the screen blend mode will let me do that, so I'll change the blend mode. I'm going to come down here and drop the scale setting down because it's going to make a harsher transition, and what I'm really trying to do is give myself an area to put text over here. And I just showed you a little tip. You can move your cursor to the left and to the right and up and down, and you can change some of your layer styles. Not all of them, but when you see that arrow with the little crosshair, that means you can change it. Alright, I'm going to click OK. You'll see that it puts that little F icon. That's your indication that there's a layer style attached to the layer. If I turn the eyeball on and off, I can see it's still attached to the layer, but I can hide it if I want to. What we're going to do here is just put some text. Come up here and I'll just type in family, no matter. How about this? Even though we get mad, I think my text is a little too big. Let's drop the size down a little bit. You can see a profound statement coming, can't you? Even though we get mad at each other sometimes, okay, a lot of times, okay, most of the time, we still love. I should spell right too, shouldn't I? I'm using Bickham Script Pro, by the way. It's a great little script font. It comes with the Adobe Creative Suite, so it's a perfect font. It's a very popular font for script. Okay, so even though we get mad at each other sometimes, okay, a lot of times, most of the time, we still love each other. Aw. And I know you're not watching this because of my writing capabilities, but the whole point was I wanted to put some text over here that allowed me to see it. And if I had the layer style off, it's a little bit harder to see it with the photo behind it. So that's where I created that effect from. All right. And if you ever want to edit the effect, just double click on it and it opens it back up. And you can change the settings, or you can save it as a style. You can save it as a preset. So I'll type in new style and I'll call it Matt's white gradient from left. All right. Hit OK. Hit OK again, and that saved it as a preset. So now if I were to start from scratch again, which I can do, I'll just go to File and go down to Revert. If I open up the Styles palette, just go down to your window menu, go to Styles. You'll see it's over here at the very far end of that palette. If I just click on it, hit OK, it's going. I've got to turn this into a regular layer, sorry. If I just click on it, it adds the layer style for me. Okay, so now I didn't have to go through the dialog box and change all the settings because I saved it as a preset. Alright, so let's move on here. We're going to create a shape layer, and we're going to cover these more in the next lesson. But just for now, I'm going to choose the custom shape tool. I'm going to pick the leftmost icon up here. Again, we're going to talk about these a lot more in the next lesson. Under this shape picker here, make sure you load all shapes. Just come down here to all. You can click on that little flyout menu, and I'm going to choose the copyright symbol. I'm just going to drag out a shape onto the canvas here. And for 1 second before, I already have a style, so let me come up here, set it to none. Now let's drag out a shape on the canvas there. All right, what we've done here is create a shape layer. Okay, but I want to make this into a watermark, because if you want to protect your graphics or any of your photos, a watermark's a good way to do it. Well, let's double click on the layer. One of the ways to create a watermark is with a bevel and emboss layer style. So I'm going to click OK. The problem is you think, all right, I got to drop the opacity. As I start to drop the opacity, I not only see through the layer, all right, I not only see through to this layer that's underneath it, but I also start dropping the opacity of the watermark. Okay, and that's not what I want to do. I don't want to drop the opacity of the watermark. I just want to get the black out. Well, there's a setting under here called fill opacity. And we haven't talked about that yet because it really only affects layer styles. Or that's kind of the main place where you'll use it. So under fill opacity, if I start to decrease that and I bring it all the way to 0, we drop out the black and we keep our layer style. We basically drop out the fill of the layer. Any pixels on the layer become transparent, but we keep all of the layer styles that are on that layer. Okay? So that's what fill opacity does versus regular opacity. So now we have a nice watermark effect. Alright, so let's go ahead and delete that. Another one here. Let's go and make a rectangular selection with the rectangular marquee tool. Over here toward the right of the photo, and I'm going to duplicate just this part of the photo. Alright, I can do that by pressing Command or Control J. Alright, you normally think of that for duplicating a layer, but if you have something selected, it duplicates whatever is selected instead. And now I've got this gradient overlay applied, which frankly I don't want, so I'm just going to double click on it. It's going to open up the layer style dialog. I'm just going to turn it off. I am going to turn on stroke, and we can put a white stroke around this. So let's just change black to white. Increase the size a little bit here. You'll see the edges get a little bit rounded. If I change position from outside to inside, they'll become square, so that looks a lot better. Alright, so now we have a little kind of border Polaroid effect, if you will. I can add a drop shadow to this to give it some depth. I can control the angle of the drop shadow. I can control the size, which is going to spread it out a little bit. And if you're ever adding a drop shadow, the default percentage is usually way too much. All right, so drop that down. Take it down to 40 or 50%. You want people to know there's a drop shadow, but you don't want it to be in their face, if you will. Okay, so I always come in there and I always reduce that drop shadow and hit OK. And now to kind of show you a little bit more about layer styles, if I manipulate this layer like rotating it, alright, let's rotate it over to the side a bit, you can see the layer style follows. It doesn't stay put, it actually follows the rest of the layer, whatever I did to it. So the shadow and the stroke still follow the boundaries of the layer. I'm not sure if the rotation works because their legs are still straight down here, but we can drop our fill opacity and now we can see through. So now basically we just have a border. We have a border that we can now move around any part of the photo and position it into place here. We don't have to worry about the people in it because they were part of the layer which we dropped the fill opacity. So all we did was keep the layer style, but we got rid of whatever pixels were on the layer by dropping the fill. Alright, so get in there, experiment with these things, create your own presets. That's where it gets powerful and that's where you start to save some time because now you can create these effects with layer styles, which is faster than making them by yourself. And then when you tag on the ability to turn it into a preset, you really make for a way to increase your workflow speed and to get things done faster.